The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine.
Hey, Church Planter. Hey, why are you talking? Okay, when I say we're going live, that means shut up. Let me introduce
I don't know. I don't know these things. I've only been doing it 8 years, man.
425 episodes later.
One day I'll get it right.
I still don't understand why we were number 2 on the church planting podcast that people should listen to. We should have been number 1.
And I love that about you because, a lot of people be like, no, it was cool. I was in the Olympics, I got a silver, I placed, I stood on the platform. Pete's like, I should have had that gold.
I'm the first loser. That's what I would take the silver as. I'm the first loser.
Yeah, baby.
I knew this guy and, the company would rank all of the salesmen from 1 to 100 because there was 100 main ones. And at number 50, he would call that guy, he's the best of the worst of the best. He's the cream of the crap. That's literally rad. How he would address him. You're the cream of the crap.
Dude, that is so cool.
I know, right?
Why can't we do that at church planter conferences?
Why can't we do that in business anymore? Why can't we tell people you're a crappy employee? Shape up.
Yeah. No, you can't do that.
No.
I wonder how you would do that in church planning. How would you? Because it can't be my numbers. That's just wrong. You have no soul if you do that.
It's my numbers. Yes.
Yeah, you can't do that. That goes against everything I've ever taught. But how could we shame a church planter in a legit way?
I think
the preaching of the gospel.
It should be about baptisms.
Yeah, but all of them lie about that.
Dude, okay, I got to tell you this. This is so bad. This might have to get cut from the podcast. That's how bad this is.
It's live on Facebook. You dragging me down with you, Mitch.
No one's watching on Facebook. I can see the little numbers. No one's on it right now. So
the one guy watching, you just hurt his feelings deeply.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to cancel you.
One guy just popped up. Oh, man, never mind. I can't. Okay, no, I got to tell you, it's funny. It's really funny. So,
are you sure this is a conversation that ought to take place on Facebook Live?
It's not. Oh, it's really funny. I mean, it's not. Okay, so my buddy, I think it's okay. My buddy,
just for the record, I have no idea what's about to fly out of his mouth.
My buddy is very, very liberal, and he's one of my oldest friends. And so we always he'll come over in the mornings a lot of times and we'll work out together.
Yeah.
And so we get on all kinds of subjects. And so, so we got on the subject of abortion. I'm like, dude, where do you stand on abortion? Right. And so he was going into it and giving me his whole view. And he gets to the end, right? Because we met at Biola together, right? So, I mean, he's not following the typical Christian path by any means. I don't even think he would consider himself a Christian anymore. And so, after because he basically says, it's a tough call. He couldn't do it, but he doesn't have a problem if someone does do it in the very earliest of stages, blah, blah, blah. Right. And he's really he knows this is a sensitive subject. And then, we're working out and he goes, are you going to kick me out of your house now? And I go, I'm not the one going to hell.
Did he get the reference?
I explained it to him and it didn't matter. He was laughing his butt off when I said it because it's the most unchristian thing you could say to someone. Right. It's just, hey, that's your opinion. That's all right. Because it was so funny. I'm sorry, guys. I know that's not something that we should be laughing about, but it was really funny to me.
Well, humor can ease tension. And
by the way, that's from Seinfeld. For those of you who who didn't follow that reference, Putty is dating Elaine, and he's got a fish on the back of his car. And Elaine's like, "Don't you have a problem that I'm not a Christian?" And he just goes, "I'm not the one going to hell." I know we shouldn't be laughing about that, but it's very funny because it's so anti-Christian.
No, it is very funny. That is a funny episode. So no, I didn't think that was bad. Gosh, Mitchell,
I wasn't sure because we're laughing about
your old age.
We're laughing about going to hell. I mean,
I did see a video this week where someone was dubbing over Jesus and the 12, and I got to be honest, it did rub me the wrong way. And I think because you and I have talked about this with worship, so. For me, one of the things I've been trying to do since New Year is really incorporate worship in my daily life. So like when nobody else is around, it's important to me at least once a day to worship, it's just kind of how it is. So, and it's because I need that. It's because I'm weak in that department. And so I was listening to, Through the Word. We're doing another podcast and won't be out till June. But we're doing it on speed, like we're doing 20 episodes a week, right?
I can barely get you to show up for one.
I know, right?
It's amazing.
Well, these are 10-minute. We say 10-minute, but, preacher,
How do you do a 10-minute podcast?
We do it in 18 minutes.
It's kind of like Jamie and I were out to dinner last Saturday night, and they got this great brownie with ice cream on it and like all this chocolate caramel stuff. And so the lady's like, "Well, we've got two sizes, the personal size and the larger size. Which size would you like?" And I go, "Well, I can't possibly eat the personal size, so you're bringing the large."
That's rad. So anyways, we aim for 10, but anyways, I have to listen to Through the Word on steroids, man. And I can't, I know sometimes some of the guys on the team, they'll listen to it on 1.5 or 2 times speed on the podcast. Cause there is a podcast that has the audio guides, but I need to hear it because we're analyzing teaching. So I need to hear the tone. I need to hear the pace. I need to hear the delivery. So I got Genesis this next week. So I got 50 chapters on Genesis, but last week, the assignment was to do the Bible overview. And I gotta hand it to Langham. For those of you who don't know, Chris Langham developed an app. He's a guy I handed Refuge Long Beach over to. I've known him for, 20-something years. And he is just such a gifted teacher. And, he's mastered this art of 10-minute chapter summaries. But his choice of chapters for what he would include, I think there's 20-something of them, for a Bible overview for people just discovering the Bible, is so unique. He's got the part where the Benjamites hide in the bushes and steal everybody's wives, and he puts that in there on the Bible overview. And he goes, "Why did I put this in there? Because there's some weird stuff in the Bible. And you got to know that up front." So there was so many cool choices he put. He didn't do Genesis 1. He didn't do Genesis 3. He did Genesis 2. And I was really kind of puzzled by his choice of chapters. Well, then on the podcast, we take it apart. How would you teach a Bible overview? If he does Genesis, it's how do you teach through the book of Genesis? Well, by the end of that Bible overview, dude, it's the second to last chapter he does is Revelation 5. And of course, that's the throne room of heaven. And that's where they're doing the Lamb. The Ancient of Days is on the throne, and then in heaven it's mournful, which you never think about it being mournful in heaven. They're singing, but they're mournful because no one's worthy to take the scroll. And that just so hit me. He was teaching through it. And then the song, it says, and then they sung a new song. And this new song is filled with joy and pride and admiration because Jesus appears as the Lamb who was slain. And I don't know, man, I had to stop and I was just weeping. And I was singing that one Revelation song, Heaven's Mercy Seat. I don't remember all that, but it's called Revelation song. It's probably one of my favorite modern hymns because it's just straight out of Revelation. And I always think to myself, why are you writing all this trite crap? There's some meaty stuff. in the, like, you got this whole book. He is 150 chapters of hymns for you to choose from. Let's do it, and I just don't like a lot of the modern worship music we talk about. But anyways, it was so powerful to me. And this practice of kind of entering into worship in my own life, just personally, just even one song a day is changing me. I don't know how to put it. Well, it's not that I'm a fuddy duddy, but I saw this video where people took this film of Jesus and put all these like voices over it going, first off, they made Jesus sound like a wimp, which bothered me. Second off, they're like, I saw what you did behind the tree. And he's telling off all the disciples for stuff he saw them do. And then at the end, he stands up and proclaims there's no hope. You're all doomed. You're all sinners. And I came away just going, wow, what a contrast. That's how the church today, because it was a church that made the video.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, holy crap. Like the contrast was so just in my face of like, we treat Jesus this way, but in heaven, they can't keep themselves back from weeping in heaven that there's no one worthy to open the scroll, and then falling down nonstop, praising, admiring. Like they can't help, they're falling all over themselves, worshiping him. And it just, I don't know, man, like it just really hit me. So I've been kind of praying through that, like working through it, like, Lord, how do we get that sense of awe in your presence and that Christ-centeredness back as a church? Because, heaven knows we haven't had that. We had church has its idols galore. I mean, election year will show you that real fast, but I mean, wow. Just hit me, man. That's all. I know it's not really good smack talk.
No, but it reminds me of, this isn't really good smack talk either, but I had a good friend of mine who, she was an agent of mine when I was had my insurance business, and I officed with her and another guy for, I don't know, a year or two, maybe longer, who knows. And she's a Jehovah's Witness. And her, neighborhood that she works, right, that she goes around, door knocks and all that, is my neighborhood. So a year or two ago, maybe longer, I don't even remember how long ago it was, she's there out training her, whatever they call the secondary person. And she comes and knocks on my door. And I'm like, hey, come in, right? Because I got two theories behind that. Number one, my neighbors may not be able to handle the Jehovah's Witness because they don't really know much about the Jehovah's Witness. And
right.
The longer I can keep you talking to me, the less time you have to go talk to anyone else. So that's kind of my philosophy on that.
That's how we were taught, right? That used to be the thing. Waste as much of their time as possible.
Well, I don't see it as wasting it. I just don't want them to go talk to anyone else. And so, it's not, I don't even remember what we got into on that talk, but because I remember at one point I was like, well, the problem is, I can't really debate you with your Bible because they've kind of changed things in your Bible.
Right.
And I know that you don't believe that, but I mean, it's kind of a well-documented thing. And, so there's only so much discussion we can, but we have that kind of relationship, right? Where I could say that. And it wasn't like we were strangers. Like I wouldn't say that to a stranger Jehovah's Witness who stopped off at my door. Like I would try and take the verses that, as I always say, they forgot to change.
Right.
And make them read it in their own Bible and go, see, this is what I'm saying. Jesus is God, not some created being. And so she texts me out of the blue Saturday. Hey, you know what? My church is doing this thing in Revelation. And I remember you were talking to me about this section of Revelation. And here's the Zoom password. Love for you to join. So I didn't get back to her until Monday. And basically I just started going into it. I go, well, here was the passage I was talking about in Revelation. It was Revelation 19:10. And for all of my gun friends, I always remember 19:10 because it was this close to being a 19:11, that close. And it's the scene where John like bows down and starts worshiping the angel. And the angel's like, oh, hey, yo, whoa, dude, don't worship me. I'm not worthy of worship. Only God's worthy of worship. That's not me. And so I was pointing out, I go, this is what, an angel would do. This is what a created being would do. I go, now let's look at John 20:28. That's where
That's
Thomas,
a master stroke where you're taking it right there. That is the master stroke.
well, and then I go, John 20:28, that's where Thomas, doubting Thomas, right, didn't believe until he saw. And then all of a sudden he sees Jesus, puts his hands in the wounds, and he's like, my Lord and my God. And I go, now, what does Jesus do? Does Jesus go, no, don't call me God. Don't give me worship. He basically accepts it. And he goes, by the way, that's great because you could see me, but everybody who doesn't see me and they believe, that's even better.
Yeah, he says, blessed are you. He actually praises him for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that started the conversation. And then, she goes, oh, those, and then I said, by the way, since, Jehovah's Witnesses won't accept any of my material or come to my church, then I'm not going to go to your church. I'm like, we got to have a fair ground if we're going to do this. If you want to dialogue, I'm happy to dialogue about it. And then she goes, so she gets back to me and she's like, wow, those are some really good points. And of course, then she starts to hit on the Trinity because they got, huge problems with the Trinity, with the whole concept of the Trinity. Have you done much study on the Trinity? And I'm like, hot dog, here we go. And literally, and this is all being done via text. The text was so long, it wouldn't get sent to her. So I had to break it up into all these sections so I could send it over to her. And then she was like, oh, wow, that's great. We'll continue this discussion next week. I'm like, great, let's do it. let's talk about it.
They never turned up.
What?
They never turned up? Or is this like last week?
No, this is just the other day. This is Monday and yesterday. So she's like, oh, we got to get, the most holy holiday for us is the memorial of Jesus. So, I'll talk to you next week after that. I'm like, cool, let's talk.
Wow. That's great, man.
We'll see where it goes, man.
Well done, you. Well done, Pete.
And all the time I was sitting there thinking in the back of my head, she doesn't realize I got access to people like Peyton, all the apologetics.com guys. I'm like, all right, let's go.
Hey, Walter Martin's daughter, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, come on. Invite her over.
Oh, man. That'd be fun.
So, hey, what was I going to say?
Patrick Allen says, last time I spoke with the JW, they threw their Bible at my head.
Whoa. Okay, now that's the conversation right there.
I want to hear the conversation that caused that one to happen. I mean,
yeah, man. Yeah, we need to hear that. I've never had a Bible thrown at my head.
I know, right? I kind of feel like I haven't done it right yet.
I have been beaten down in the street, but I've never had a Bible thrown at my head.
Yeah.
So there's first time for everything. Yeah. And it's like when you say I've never broken a bone, probably that'll happen to me later today.
You've never broken a bone?
Well, I said that the day before I broke a bone. Of course, I was playing chicken out of a moving car. I won when I jumped out, but I did break my wrist. I was 17, young and foolish. I had hair then. It was long and flowed down to my butt crack.
And it wasn't white.
It was not. Gosh. I know I can shampoo stuff in now. And I saw it on a commercial. When I go to hotels and I go traveling, I just got back from Catalina. I see commercials. I'm like, I see this guy shampooing his hair. I'm like, I can shampoo my beard in the shower.
Well, it's funny. I'll do these webinars.
Like full black. I'll be like, hey, Pete.
I'll do these webinars where, your face is really small up in the corner on Zoom. And this little soul patch is so white. They're like, is there something wrong with my monitor? There's like this white thing on your face. I got to stop and explain to everyone. I'm 45, man. I got white facial hair. What do you want me to do?
It's this thing growing on my face. It's hair-ish. Dude, that's hilarious.
It's hairish.
Hilarious. It's weird, man. Like when we started doing this podcast, this is all black.
Yeah, I look back at some of our early pictures. There's a photo.
It looks like I used that shampoo back then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Hair color for men or whatever it was.
You could tell it was naturally dark. There's this picture that comes up on my TV because we got a screensaver, and it's from the baptism at the beach in Long Beach. It's totally black for you, man. Oh, yeah. It's totally black.
Yeah, when I first published my first book, they're like, "Hey, we want to put your picture on the cover of the book," because I guess I was young looking and kind of radical looking back then. And I said no. They don't ask anymore. Now they say no. So they're like, yeah, old guy. Right.
By the way, I think it's hilarious that you told your publisher, Pete Mitchell, he's an influencer. I want him to
I know, right?
get a copy of a book.
Hey, everybody wants to get on our podcast. So, hey, next week, I got to announce this because Pete doesn't do authors, he informs me now. But I am interviewing.
I should say I don't do authors with Peyton.
I got you an audiobook.
You did.
I was so proud of myself. I'm like, oh, hey, you saw the email. I'm like, my podcasting partner, he likes to listen to the book. Could you please send an Audible? And they're like, don't share this with anybody. It was like a big like cloak and dagger thing. Like, we'll give it to you, but just you. Here's the audio files. So I have it on iTunes now. Which is rad. I can listen to R.C. Sproul's biography. If you didn't know, this Crossway is coming out with a biography of R.C. Sproul.
By the way, that was part of the reason I was like, yeah, this would not be a fun interview for me at all. R.C. Sproul.
I'm already geeking out on
it early. Right? I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that podcast. Nope, I'm out.
Oh, man. I can't wait. I shook his hand once, Pete.
Did you watch it?
Deep into my eyes, and he said, and I kid you not, this actually happened. This happened on 2 occasions. He met Andrew and I. He looks at us and he goes, "Do I know you? Where do I know you from?" And I died a little inside. And so if I interviewed R.C. Sproul, there's a couple of times where Pete and I have interviewed people, and I've been nervous. Francis Chan was one the first time. Now, I will say, second time, I was not nervous about Francis at all. We were like this.
When did you do the second one? Did you do that one without
Exponential? Me? Remember that time that they crammed, like they tried to get like right after the main stage in Exponential, like 2-3 years ago. They put him in this room with me and Ralph Moore that I was supposed to interview the two of them together, which it was an epic interview. Probably the best thing I've ever heard Francis Chan do, because he talked about his failure, which was just amazing. And then Ralph was like kind of chiming in on it. But my gosh, but they did it right after the main session and did not give us a big breakout room. 200 people fit in this thing. I couldn't even get in. So Ralph had to come out and get me. And he's like, "Move, everybody move." He's like yelling at everybody to part the hallway, and I came in. But yeah, so I was nervous with him. The other person I got nervous with, it wasn't an interview, because I've been on Carey Nieuwhof's show. And we've interviewed him a couple times. I was never nervous, but when I met him in person, he was so freaking tall. I got nervous. It was his height. Oklahoma. I'm calling it now, Pete.
Were you having small man syndrome or what?
Yes. I was like, we were standing at Exponential at the Starbucks there, and we were just chatting. He's super cool. I mean, he's a really nice dude. But I just got really conscious of how little I was. I felt like a child, and it affected me a bit.
That's funny.
So I really like Carey at a distance, but in person, I'm a little intimidated. So if we ever interview him again, it has to be like this. It can never be live. What else? But I was going to say, if I interviewed R.C. Sproul, I would be so nervous. I just because that dude shaped me. I remember working on the factory line in Port Talbot, Wales, as a missionary there. And I joined Tape of the Month Club like 10 years before that. And then decided, since I was working in this factory, everybody had their Walkmans and Discmans. Like, that's how long ago this was. 1999. So I'm working, it's 2001. It was 9/11 it hit. So 2011 or 2000, gosh dang it. Yeah, 2001. I'm old, dude. I'm old. I'm almost 50. So 2001. And I literally listened to like 10 years worth, like 200 and something episodes of R.C. Sproul.
Wow.
On my Tape of the Month, just all this backlog that I had. And just used to enjoy him so much, learned so much. So he is one of my heroes. I think he was, for our generation, perhaps he was our C.S. Lewis. He was the greatest Christian thinker of our generation, but sadly he was only owned by the Reformed people, but amazing brain, amazing mind. So anyways, I would have been nervous to interview him, I think.
Well, we got to get into our topic because I got to leave early today. So
yeah, we got a good one too.
Greet Scott. It's time for this week's topic.
No.
Greet Scott. It's time for this week's topic.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so today we're talking about how much should a church planner or minister make. And
Which, by the way,
Rob
Goodell commented on the Facebook post. How much did the apostle make, or the prophet, or the evangelist, or the teacher? Why does the shepherd get all the money?
Yes. Why does he get all the money and all the women?
Oh,
Don't go there.
Oklahoma.
I'm just teasing. Oklahoma. So, I will say, you do sometimes see, this is bad, but you do sometimes see ministers with trophy wives. And I always wonder, would she have been with him if he weren't in a position of power? Now, in fairness, I met Andrew at 17 in high school English class. I was a nobody, a short-haired or a long-haired little short man. I did that to myself.
Are you saying she's a trophy wife?
I am kind of saying that.
There you
go. But she is to me anyways. 30 years ago this year is when I started hanging out with her. And 30 years
I still think one of the best stories of the two of you is you were each on a date with someone else, and you pull out your wallet and a picture of her falls on the ground, and everyone's just kind of staring at it, and you're like,
So in those 30 years, I dated her for 5, and I've been married to her for 24. You do the math, that's 29 years. And 1 year, she was with this bonehead, this one guy. And during that years, I kind of let her slip away. I was just starting to see her. She and I bumped into it. She was with her boyfriend. I was with my girlfriend, and I had to show her my ID picture for college because I paid the guy $5 so that I could do like this in my ID picture. And I was going like this, and I had my hair in a Dr. Seuss top knot, back when Dr. Seuss was cool. And so I had this big fountain of hair, and I totally looked like the Dr. Seuss character. And so I said, I got to show you my student ID. I paid this guy like $10 for this or $5 or whatever. And as I go to get it, the little plastic insert in my wallet flops open, and there's a picture of me and Andrea at this boat dance that I kind of tricked her into going to with me as a friend, and our senior year. And time froze, time stopped, and everybody looked at it. And I remember I'm thinking, uh-oh. And because my girlfriend is looking down going, what's a picture of Andrew doing in Peyton's wallet? Andrew's thinking, what's a picture of me doing in Peyton's wallet? And her boyfriend's saying, what's a picture of Peyton doing or Andrew doing in Peyton's wallet? And it was not a good moment at the time, although now it's a really good moment. I relish that moment. It was one of the best moments. So see, church planners, so the lesson for today is what may seem like a really bad moment for you right now could be a really good moment later on, like this podcast.
There you go.
Maybe you'll return to it. All right, so back to our topic. So thank you, Rob Goodell, for that distraction, which we are easily distracted by bright, shiny objects. So don't wave them in front of us anymore. But I will say this, it came up, the guy from Preachers and Sneakers, he outed himself publicly and said, this is who I am. This is the real me. I followed him on Twitter. He had 64 followers. I think I was number 65. So that was kind of fun. Just to say, your actual Preachers and Sneakers has thousands of followers. Maybe, I don't know. Is it millions? I don't know I think it was up there a bit. But the actual dude had 60 something followers. So he said, my friend put me up to it, and it seemed like a good idea. And I just started posting pictures of preachers with $10,000 shoes on. And if you don't know about that, that sparked a controversy about how much money should preachers and pastors and church planners make. So Pete, how much?
I got a different opinion on money than most people. I'm not a pastor.
Dig about you, man, like Rod Tidwell said.
I'm not a pastor, man. So I don't have a problem with making money. I have a problem with not making money. That's the problem that I have, is when I'm not making money or people aren't making money. So
back when we used to have sound effects, back when we were a real podcast, and remember we used to have that. I like money, sir. I keep some in a jar at my home on top of my refrigerator. I'd like to put more money in that jar. That's where you come in, sir.
Yeah. So I mean, the worker is worthy of his wages for show, but at the same time too, I part of the reason why I'm such a big fan of bivocational pastors and even, I was talking about this on our mastermind group that we've got. I was going over some ideas of what I could do with bivocational pastors. And one of my guys goes, well, why don't you start talking to them about what their church can do to create business? Not just the pastor, but all the assets of the church. There's untapped assets basically that could be utilized. And I was like, man, that's a great point. And he went back and reminded me of Michael Cheshire's book, How to Knock Over a 7-Eleven and Other Ministry Training, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. And think about all the businesses that they went into as they were church planning, from cleaning out homes, right? During the foreclosure crisis of 2008, 2009, 2010, to running a U-Haul, like whatever they call it, a franchise, all the people who were leaving and moving in and all that type of stuff. I mean, like they were getting involved in their community using all kinds of different business strategies to connect with people in the community. And so, I mean, I have a totally different view on money than most people do. Like even when I see the memes that are making fun of Joel Osteen, which obviously I'm not a Joel Osteen fan, right? But they're like, oh, look at the house he lives in. Look at the church that he's got, and all of this is tax free. And I'm like, well, first of all, it's not tax free to him, and secondly, most of that's from his books. Taxes. Yeah, and most of that's from his
self-employment tax.
Well, big time, right? Yeah. And you got tax on your royalties because most of it's from his books, and it's like, but forget about that. I'm like, but he's not getting that. The bulk of his income is not coming from his church. Now, it is in the sense that gave him a position, which gave him the notoriety, which allowed him to sell, millions of copies of his books. But it's not like the salary of the church is what gave him that home. It was his books and stuff. And I don't have any problem with that. Like I got other problems with Joel Osteen that has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, that brings up, Rick Warren, who, when his purpose-driven church took off.
Purpose-driven life. It wasn't the purpose-driven church.
Oh, wasn't? I thought it was purpose. Okay, you're right. It was purpose-driven life. He literally started reverse tithing. And he tied 90%, kept 10%, and then also paid back 23 years of his salary to Saddleback and said, no longer pay me. I'm making enough off my book contracts. I remember hearing people badmouth him, and I made a vow, and you and I have talked about this, that from then on, I remember being at a pastor's conference. I was at a table, and I stopped this conversation. I said, hey, I no longer allow anyone to badmouth that man in my presence, and here's why. And I just shared that. And I said, now, until you give 90% of your money and income to God or ministry or mission or whatever, I don't want to hear you do that in my presence again. You got to earn that. And it shut that conversation up dead. These were pastors that were older than me. But it was, you shouldn't really be bad-mouthing him. Who are you to judge another man's servant? So when it comes to this, I think, is it a bad look? Like, does it rub me the wrong way? I'm kind of with Rob Goodell, where it's like, hey, I was a missionary all those years. Now, I inherited money when my dad passed away. And I practically, as you know, inherited a beach shack in San Diego County, right by the beach, double plot. I mean, property I could never afford, but it was always dedicated to mission. And when I came off the field, a couple that were like my second mom and dad, donated the land to me and said, you can have it for what you can afford. So we went to the bank, got the biggest loan we could, and we bought it. And it wasn't much. And in fact, they're like, well, could you stretch to this amount? And we did, but it was like, if it weren't for those couple breaks, I wouldn't live where I live. And I'm conscious of that because one of the things over the years is I have worked ever since I've been back. I have never had a full-time free ride from the church, except for maybe 1 year at Refuge Long Beach, the final year when NAM kicked in. But prior to that, no, man, like that was never a part of my thing. I always was bivocational, so that, like kind of like Paul says, I worked with my hands. I still work with my hands. I don't take a paycheck from a church. I work for a living, and I work a regular job and have done. I've worked for NAM. I've worked for Exponential. There's always a job that I have so that I am free to plant when and where. I can minister anywhere. If I go to preach, like I'll go preach at a church coming up here, I don't take honorariums when I preach because I want to support that work. And I don't need your money. I am in the fortunate place of being able to tell people, I don't need anything from you. And I can remember when I was planting a church, in Wales, my last church, I had invested the money that my dad left me into property when I was dirt poor. I mean, I've told you stories about, I was so poor. I made over there the equivalent of, I think, somewhere around $1,200-$1,300 a month. And the ministry here could pay me like $2,000 a month, my mission support group. So I was making so little money. I'd come back and we were so skinny. And people would be like, man, you're on a red diet. So I have been poor. I have lived that way. I have lived with nothing and for years, and all for mission. I went to work in a factory, brought myself up a bit, worked as a firefighter, brought myself up a bit, worked as a barista, got poor as a barista. But, I always was doing jobs, window cleaning, troubleshooting, clinical troubleshooting, which is an offshoot of my RN degree. I've always done teaching in seminary. I taught Bible college for a number of years. I've always done something to make money. And to a certain degree, like when I planted in Wales, I had a big house because I'd been really wise with my money. I had a newly built big house that was considered the rich part of town. I bought it because I knew it would be a great investment. And that's what I've always done, is I've invested in property. And that I have to give props to my wife. But that was, again, there were times I was self-conscious, like, I hope nobody thinks I'm living here because of the money. And so people would always be shocked. I think I've mentioned this before, that my first 4 years, my first 3 years planning that church, I took zero money from the church. My fourth year, I took peanuts from it. My fifth year, my elder finally approached me and said, hey, you're adopting a baby. We need to pay you full time now. And so for 1 year, but by then my church knew, like, that dude has never taken a penny from us. And it was out of love for me that, but is it a bad look when you're wearing $10,000 sneakers and taking a full-time paycheck from the church? I would say yes. I think that's a bad look. Is it right or wrong? Like I say, I can't judge another man's servant, but I will argue to my grave that is a bad look. And if you're doing that, it raises serious questions.
Then what happens if it's not sneakers? What happens if it's a car? Let's say you drive a Dodge Charger and it's a really nice Dodge Charger and you really like the Dodge Charger.
You mean the what was it? What's the name of that one that it was like the highest model up? The Hellcat? The Demon or what?
Oh yeah, the Demon.
Yeah. So that's where you're going with that.
I'm just saying, I mean, where's this line that we draw? I agree that
the new breed, funny enough, the new breeders were chatting about this. One of the guys like, man, I served with a youth pastor on staff. He bought an Audi, way back in the 90s, and he paid, $14,000 for it, which was a lot of money back then, but it was used and he got it for a good deal and yada, yada. And he got no end of shtick. And I would say to you that, I got to say this, like right now I work for Through the Word. And I have always, if I work for the church, I work hard. We were joking around, Pete Mitchell, the hardest working man in church planning. One of the things I train church planners for is work ethic. You you could not, and I don't think I could, or I would struggle to keep up with the Apostle Paul. That dude worked harder than anyone. In fact, there is a verse where he says, I worked harder than anyone. Just let that sink in for a second. I worked harder than anyone. That's amazing that he can say, and I believe he was right. He worked with his hands. He, with two rich people, Priscilla and Aquila, built a tent-making empire. So these guys would be self-funded wherever they went. But I have been conscious over the years that whenever I slow down and I live off of support, and Paul did at times live off support. You can argue that pretty clearly. Best scholarship out there will tell you there were times, there were seasons where if it served the mission, like in Ephesus, he lived off support. If it served the mission for him to work with his hands, he did that. Hugh Halter gave a great rule of thumb, I would say, in his book Bivo, which is awesome. I'll be interviewing him next month on a webinar. By the way, this will have already run its course, but for those of you watching Facebook Live, Thursday, I'm interviewing Brian Sanders on Microchurch at 3 p.m. Pacific. So go to my Facebook wall and check it out and register. But anyways, all that to say, Hugh Halter said, if the only reason you should be set apart full-time, apart from your nets, is to reproduce yourself. And I find that to be a pretty consistent theme in the New Testament. Paul was, when he pulled back and was supported, he was reproducing himself. Jesus with the 12, reproducing himself. So I actually think that's quite biblical. But often the mission dictates that you are working with your hands and it serves the mission better. You're working with your hands, you got a job, you do whatever in the heck you want. But if you're living off people's donations, there's two things I'd say about that. Number one, you should not be poor. That's why Paul says, don't muzzle the ox while he treads the grain. Apparently that mindset, and I know you got thoughts on that with your dad, who is a Baptist minister, who struggled at times. I mean, because people had this mindset that you keep that minister poor. You keep him humble. Well, Paul tells him, hey, he's worthy of double honor. And scholars have often said they don't know whether that means double honor as in respect, or if it means double honor, like treat him well, right? Like honor him doubly, for what he's doing because of the importance of his work. I do think that ministers should not have to worry about their family. Like if a church is going to pay them, do it and do it well. Rule of thumb, second point, the rule of thumb, I think, is to keep the pastor's salary at a competitive level to the average person in the congregation. Not to underpay him, not to overpay him, but to pay him for what suits his context so that in that neighborhood, in that area, he's making comparable to what his congregation would make. Right. And I think that's part of the sacrifice you make on mission for those people that you're serving.
Yeah. See, I would say like with my dad as a minister, it was really at a time when Bivo wasn't like in vogue like it is now. Like it didn't happen very often. It was like, if you're a minister, you're a minister and you go get a job at a church and that's what you do. And I remember the church at one point couldn't afford to pay him. And I remember hearing this. So this is as a kid. So my parents wouldn't really talk about money around us. And I remember hearing, they hadn't paid him in like 3 months. And so he was like, okay, I got to go get a job. Like, I got to put food on the table. I got to make things happen. And that was really when he became Bivo in a sense. And he ended up leaving that church, but he's always worked with churches or in ministry. Like after that, it was almost like freeing in a sense. It was like I remember he worked as a part-time minister at this one church, and there were 3 ministers. All 3 of them were part-time, and all 3 of them had other day jobs. And that was how they could come together and take care of this one older church. Like, all the people that went to it were much older and it was dying off. And he was like, great, I get to use my gifts, I get to be in ministry, and I got to make my income elsewhere, which what he ended up doing was becoming a school teacher and specifically working at juvenile hall and severe behavioral disorder kids. And
that's so cool. What a rad job. Your dad's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
He's a good dude. He actually has contributed towards New Breed. So I know that's been something that, you know, obviously your dad's done some things right. I mean, I think those times of poverty and struggle too, they teach you. Like, I remember my grandparents did pretty well financially, but I remember talking to them once saying, hey, you know, I was asking them for some advice. And they told me back then, because I was paid peanuts when I first started, because I started at a mega church, and often big ministries like that, like the pastor gets paid really well, and everybody else, it's kind of like, well, you should be lucky to be here, you know. So you'll work at a much lesser rate, and that was kind of the tradition of the churches I came from. So I made nothing, and I remember them telling me, they're like, hey, when you make, they go, babe, the struggles. I know it's hard. And they were always there. They're always like, if you need money, and I never asked for it, but they'd always say, if you ever can't pay your bills or you come see us, you know. But I'll tell you what, man, like they said, those struggles are what is going to help you the most. And that was true. So one other thing is that, I was going to say that, what was I going to say, Pete?
I
What
don't
was I
know.
going to say? You don't know?
Whatever it was wasn't going to be good.
I surely don't know. No, it was really good. I just got distracted thinking about my grandparents, but that was valuable advice. It really does help you think about it. But I wanted to really say that as far as you know, like I was going to say this about New Breed. Now I brought up with your dad. With New Breed, that's a church planting network that I've run for years. And it was really to help planners learn to plant at no cost or free, because that's how I always did it. I never, and it's still to this day, I've never fundraised for a church plant. It's just, I see guys go around going, we need $100,000 to do this. Now, if I did something like what Hugh Halter did in Alton, where he opened up a center, and I may actually open a training center for planners, a Bivo training center in future, then I would definitely raise funds for that. I'm actually talking to a couple people about it right now. But for New Breed, man, like that was one thing to this topic. I have always, and my board, it's funny, I think about this a lot because as the years have gone on, there's been so much respect. Like my board treats me with respect. They tell me, hey, you need to think about your retirement. We need to set something up for your retirement or whatever. And over the years, I've never asked for a salary. What they do is they just pay my minister's housing allowance. So I don't get rich. So if someone drops $100,000 on New Breed, which happened, I don't go, hey guys, time for a raise from it. I don't touch it, right? Like it's not for me. People aren't giving that money for me. My housing allowance over the years has been pretty small. I've been able to live wisely and live in a way where I don't make a ton of money. But what I was going to say is we actually took a huge hit, this year, like 2020, the pandemic, like just our donors dropped off like crazy. I think we lost anywhere from, I think it's about 60% of our donors, which was a bit alarming because I only discovered it this week. And I was like, holy heck. So I don't go out there flogging and asking, but I've got to go into a time of fundraising right now. Well, I'll tell you one thing. So if you're out there and you have a big budget, let me say this. No, but honestly, if you want to pour into mission,
church planner, if your church needs another place to support.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing I would say for church planners. I would say from day one, make sure you're giving a mission. Don't be
here's
the
an
church
interesting
plant.
question that Craig Nelson brought up. I don't know if you saw it on the Facebook post.
Yeah.
Should pastors be tithing back into the church that pays their salary?
Yes and no. They should be tithing. It doesn't always, that's a great question because one of the things that Jesus rebukes the Pharisees for in Matthew's at 23, he says, woe to you, for you give to was it called the Koban, the little box there, and you say, I give, but what Jesus was saying is that you say already gave to the Koban. Well, that was to their own paycheck. And so you raise a really good question. I personally tithe, and always have when I'm at a church plant. I don't tithe 100% of my church or my tithe to that church for that reason. So I give out to various ministries. So my tithe will go to different places. And in fact, it's funny because I attend a church right now where I had to tell them, hey, I'm going to give to you, but please understand, I do tithe, but my tithe goes to various other ministries that I've either served in the past. Like, I don't give to New Breed myself but should I give something to the church I support? Yes. And I've also thought maybe I should give to New Breed, but again, I do think you should give something, but I think you should make it clear, because again, that's a bad look too, if you're expecting other people to give at a certain standard that you yourself are not willing to do.
Right. See, I would say
that's a really good question.
I think that's the bigger thing, because I've said this before on the podcast. I think sometimes you need to set the example, because otherwise what it looks like to the congregation, we give to you, not to God, not to the church. We're giving to you, and you're just sitting there collecting it all. Thank you so much. I can go about my life. And that to me is a bad visual as well.
But if you're giving 10%, that's the thing. Think of it. This is why I drew the line with donors, because if I work hard, because I know, so like Through the Word is a donor supported ministry. I work my butt off for that thing. Like, I work hard for it. And like recently we had a conversation about project pay, and I just said, I don't want any project pay. I make what I make, and I'm happy with that. And I'll give everything I have to the ministry during my set hours. You'll get all of me. And I don't, because they take good care of us, and they say, hey, if you need for this, and I just said, I don't care if I go over my quota. Don't pay me any extra project pay. If I go over my contract, that's cool. Just have it. But like, the thing is that when it goes to, shoot, I don't know where my brain's going, Pete. I think I need to eat more food. You just brought up a point, so if I'm living off donations and you are sacrificing 10% of your income, just work this out with me, and 100 other people are sacrificing 10% of their income, and I watch this one guy, while everyone else is sacrificing, this one dude's getting richer and richer and richer and richer. Pretty soon, he's not sacrificing. He's not leading by example anymore. He's not sacrificing. He's just getting richer and richer and richer. And that's what I think the preachers and sneakers is bringing up is, whoa, wait a second. You're living off the sacrifices of others, and you're living a lifestyle none of them could afford. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I do have a problem with that. I'll be the first to say, I think that's a bad look. Right. But I can't, when people say, well, where's the line? There's a couple things here, and I know you got to go in like 2 minutes, but there's a couple things here. Number one, you need a group of people around you that will tell you no, right? If you're not accountable to a group of people that aren't afraid of you, then you've got the wrong people around you. You need people that are willing to look at you and say, I love you. And because I love you and I want this ministry to do well and succeed, I got to say no on this. You can't do that. Or when, you hey, I think we should have this salary, and anyone who dissents against us is in there's so many chronicles of abuses when it comes to money. Again, if the rule of thumb was, you made about what your people made, the average income of your church, and you were comfortable and you could pay all your bills, debt, personal bad financial decisions and debts, like the ministry's not there to solve your bad financial decisions. Let's get that really clear right now. It's not there to solve your problems. You got to solve your own problems like everyone else in this world. But if you made bad financial decisions, that doesn't factor in, right? You just make what your average congregant makes. And that's good. And if the board wants to top it up a bit and say, hey, we want to give you a little extra because you're going to be dealing with child deaths and like almost like a danger pay, we'll give you a little extra, maybe even raise it up 10% what the average person makes here, just because you're going to be dealing with everybody's junk all the time. Fine. And giving you vacations and soul care packages and things, fantastic. That's rad. Like they should take care of you because you're going to take a beating in that role, but you should not be getting rich off other people's donations. Right. So anyways, that said, my heroes are guys like, there's a church that I interviewed for Exponential where all their team decided we're going to go Bible so we can really support mission. And the whole staff came off staff and went and worked with their hands and became a Bible team. Stuff like that you hear about and you're like, that's rad, right? So I think the system opens itself up to problems and abuse. And Pete, while you're doing all that bivocational working, you don't have time.
So wanting to do the lead in, and you beat me to it.
Gosh dang it! I don't give you a chance to talk, man. That's a problem. Yeah, well, Pete, while you're doing all that bivocational working, so you can buy those $10,000 sneakers, you need someone to do all your church's financial stuff.
Well, I want to be clear here. I don't care about footwear. For me, it would be $10,000 in guns and ammo. Nice. So I need a great little company called simplifychurch.com to take care of all my accounting needs.
Who's that, Pete?
Well, it's simplifychurch.com. There's a guy by the name of Josh Henry, former church planner, pastor, and that's his whole ministry now is he helps churches with their finances.
Simplifychurch.com. And it reminded me your statement of Mark Driscoll, who said, headed a chapter, Lord, there was $11.23 in the offering this week, and all I want to do with it is buy bullets. So that was a great chapter title. But real quick, as we exit, Simplify Church, man, that was how I knew that the donors are up off. They got this rad portal where you can go on, and because I was like, man, our deposits are pretty low the last couple months. So I looked it up and I was like, wow, I could track everything on there. And I was pretty, I never have. So it tells you I have a treasure, but I want to see stuff. So they showed me stuff and I was horrified. So that's newbreednetwork.org/give. Sorry, I'm amusing myself here, but really go over there. All right. So, hey, this has been Peyton Jones and Pete Mitchell reminding you, if you want to reach the ones nobody's reaching, go get a job, punk, and do what nobody else is doing. And we'll
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planter Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplanterpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplantermagazine.com.